Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. Carbon capture and storage is often referred to as a key part of our transition to net zero. It's one of those things that you hear a lot about, but if asked to explain what it is, how it works, and how it'll help us get to net zero, I suspect many, including myself, might come up a little short. There's also a lot more to it than just being an environmental tool. Former Labor Minister and economist Craig Emerson once described it as a gift horse for Australia, going on to say that after wool, coal and iron ore, the storing of carbon in soil may be Australia's next big opportunity in the global economy. Definitely time to find out more. Hamish Webb is the Executive Director and CEO of Pastures. Hamish, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Thank you very much, Sean. It's a pleasure to be with you.
How do you start with a 3,200-acre sheep and cattle farm and end up establishing a major soil carbon project?
Well, to be honest, it was a little bit by accident, Sean. We weren't necessarily looking to do a soil carbon project. We were just looking to optimise our soil health to improve our pasture production for our livestock business. The aha moment was from our agronomist, Precision Pastures. They identified that the activities to improve our soil health are what's called eligible activities to undertake a soil carbon sequestration project with the Clean Energy Regulator to generate ACCUs.
Okay, and so an ACCU is the Australian Carbon Credit Union. How do you do it?
Yes, so the Australian Carbon Credit Units, the Clean Energy Regulator, which was established in 2012, it's their job to come up with methodologies for industry and agriculture to either reduce, avoid, or abate or sequester 1 tonne of carbon equivalent. And there are many methods. I think there's somewhere between 40 and 50 of them. And the soil carbon sequestration method is actually one of the newest and perhaps one of the most complex. It involves undertaking a baseline soil test at year 0 and then undertaking a new activity to improve or optimise soil health, which, if it does in fact increase soil carbon, it will be determined from a further measurement, another round of baseline soil testing, all independently assessed by a lab. And then from that, those 2 comparisons of soil test results, the Clean Energy Regulator will issue 1 ACCU per tonne of CO2 sequestered.
Okay, now just break that down for me a little bit. And off air, you were saying carbon actually flows in and out of soil. And so by improving the soil's ability to capture carbon when it's there, the outflow is less. Am I sort of saying that right?
Yes, that's right. I mean, we are really at the start of understanding deeply how this cycle works. But in simple terms, carbon is cycling through all soil at all times. We've spent about the last 200 years in Australia removing carbon and nitrogen from our agricultural soils, thinking we were doing the right thing by maximising our agricultural production. It's clear that our soil carbon levels are low, and there are many ways that we can increase them. That includes things like resolving soil health issues like acidity or nutrient deficiency or toxicity, but also husbandry activities such as optimising time-controlled grazing so that pastures are not overgrazed but are given sufficient rest time to recover, and that can maximise root growth. And fundamentally, that's what we're talking about for soil carbon, maximising root growth, which is what is one of the key ways carbon is sequestered into the soil.
Okay, so if you're maximising root growth, and I'm trying to remember my kind of year 10 science here, carbon is basically stored in or becomes part of the root growth system. Does it diminish or does it get stored there? I'm not sure.
As I say, there's several ways it's coming in. Probably the 2 most common can be through a small amount through decomposing leaf litter or organic material on the surface. Most of that is oxidised back into the atmosphere. But the key way that carbon is finding its way into the soils is through photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide coming into the plants, converted to carbohydrates, which go down to the root tips and root hairs to feed microbes, which are bringing the nutrients to the plant. And there's an awful lot of activity going on down there.
Yep.
But that's the key way that you're putting carbon into the soil. So we want to encourage that And there are many, many ways agronomically and agriculturally that we can encourage root growth.
Okay, so presumably if we do that, your actual output on top of the soil, because you have healthier soil, should be better as well. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And as I said, that's how we found ourselves in the first place looking at soil carbon. Soil carbon, unlike most of the other ACU methods, has significant co-benefits for production. And indeed, that's sort of why I think the opportunity is so strong for Australian agriculture, because what's good for soil carbon sequestration is also good for production. It can lead to greater drought resilience as well.
Stay with me, Hamish. We'll be back in a minute. I'm speaking to Hamish Webb, Executive Director and CEO of Precision Pastures. What is the size of the prize here? What you're talking about and you're doing on your 3,200 acre sheep and cattle farm? I want to talk about how you've sort of pushed other farmers to do it in a moment. But what is the size of, how much difference can Australia with its land mass make doing what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And there's many ways you can look at this, I think, Sean. Australian agriculture accounts for over 50% of our land mass. So looking at it at an area is one way. You mentioned Craig Emerson in your introduction. Another notable person that spoke on this issue was John Anderson in 2021. And he framed the market this way. He said that there's approximately 65 million hectares of ideal Australian cropping and pastoral country, which he believed could sequester up to 103 million tonnes of CO2 per year. So at today's market price per carbon credit of $33, that's about $3.5 billion per year. He went on to say that there is another 200 million hectares of rangeland agriculture, perhaps semi-arid agriculture, which he thought could also sequester 100 million tonnes. So add that all up, it's about $7 billion a year worth of carbon credits in the potential soil carbon market.
Now, how do we measure this, Hamish? How do we measure it going in and we're able to measure it going out? How does it work?
Yeah, this is where the complexity of the method really comes in, Sean. So soil carbon projects must be baseline soil tested at the beginning. And that's quite a rigorous process, and it involves a lot of mapping, which must be approved by the Clean Energy Regulator. There's random GPS coordinates supplied to the project, and we must go out to those coordinates and sample down to at least 30 centimetres. Those random soil samples are sent off to an independent lab for assessment, and then there's about 40 to 50 calculations looking at the gravimetric weight of that soil sample, the bulk density, obviously the soil carbon content, to ultimately come up with a stock of soil carbon in tonnes per hectare. Mm-hmm. And that's the measurement that we're looking at from the baseline to the subsequent rounds of sampling. And where we can demonstrate an increase in soil carbon stocks, the regulator would look to issue the ACCUs for that.
So potentially for people like you and others with land holdings, and I know that you've helped other farmers establish themselves in this play, I mean, there's a financial reward for this as well.
Yes, absolutely. ACCUs are obviously a financial instrument, just like a bond or something else. They are currently trading at around $33. But personally, and Precision Pastures doesn't give advice on this, from a personal perspective, I'm actually a bit more interested in retaining my carbon credits. They are a tax-deferred income, so they can just sit on my balance sheet. And there's a lot of talk about what the future may bring in terms of needing my own carbon credits as a livestock producer. Whatever the future brings, I'll have my own carbon credits there. In the meantime, as a financial instrument, it can sit on my balance sheet. That's my own personal view, but certainly we're talking about a significant value for producers that undertake a soil carbon project.
So the impact on the land itself then is positive. Like when I think of carbon capture and storage, which is different, I get that, but I often wonder about the impact on the land itself. But what you're saying, this carbon sequestration, I can hardly say the word, it's actually a positive for the land then.
That's right. So I think it's important to differentiate carbon capture and storage from a gas or a hydrocarbon perspective. The soil carbon sequestration method is specifically about agricultural production. It must be conducted on an operating agricultural enterprise. And as I said, it's been developed primarily from producers, researchers, and groups like Meat and Livestock in Australia. And they have done a fantastic job of identifying something that has co-benefits to production. And it is a bit complex. It does require some costs for measurement, but it really does serve to be a win-win for producers. And for that reason, I think that the prospects for the soil carbon industry are very strong.
That's very exciting. Was Craig Emerson right? Is this going to be a boom industry for Australia?
Well, certainly by the look of the numbers that John Anderson was saying, I mean, they're almost ridiculous, eye-watering numbers.
Yeah.
But even if we just look at the production benefits, there's a lot of reason producers are thinking about this anyway. So it's a bit of an incentive to do the right thing. And for that reason, we think it's pretty prospective for producers.
Fantastic. Hamish, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
It's a pleasure, Sean. Thank you very much.
That was Hamish Webb, Executive Director and CEO of Precision Pastures. This is the Fear and Greed Business Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.